Let's see.
Okay. Hi Denise, Judy York.
All right.
Nice to meet
Good
you.
morning, everyone. Is it morning? Yes, it is.
Yes, still
Sorry.
It's one of those weeks. I'm Lucky Tesopoulos, and welcome to our meeting of the Permanent Streamlining Task Force Subcommittee. I got a few announcements to make before we go with the self-introductions. First, I will ask you to, if you please, place your cell phones on silent or vibrate mode. That's me too. And the restrooms are right around the corner over here. We've got two of them. In case of an emergency, we may need to shelter in place or evacuate the building. If an evacuation is called, please exit the building from this exit, which is the one nearest to us. And if we need to shelter in place, like in case of an earthquake, please drop down, cover your head, and hold on to your chair. And that completes my general announcements. With that, let's go ahead and start with our self-introductions. Lucky Tesopoulos, Deputy Executive Officer with the Engineering and Permitting Division.
Amir Dejbal, Assistant Deputy Executive Officer for Engineering and Permitting.
Shamov, Senior Engineering Manager.
David Rothbart, Los Angeles County Sanitation Districts.
Brian Stromar, Senior Admin at SCAQMD.
All right, Information Management.
Denise Cullen-Coggin, Secretary, AQMD.
Judy York, York Engineering.
Bridget McCann, WISPA.
Bill Pierce, the Boeing Company.
How about
Ariana, County Sanitation.
Or Forzan, Airport Consultant, representing MDI Space System.
Matt Smith, Blair.
Anthony Peng, Metropolitan Water District.
Scott Johnson,
Janice West, AQMD Permit Streamlining. Jennifer McMullen, City of Corona.
Chris Flake, LA Sam.
Cynthia Carter, LA County Sanitation District.
Okay. And
Hi, good morning. Gene Lopez with Siders Collision Center and a member of the California Auto Body Association.
Dana Dale, Engineering.
Good morning, I'm Saad Karam of the Information Management Division at the AQMD.
David Houck, Engineering, Permit Streamlining.
David Arnold, Engineering and Permitting.
William Thompson, Engineering. Ed Walker, Senior Engineer.
excellent. Thank you, and welcome to you all. So we have a brief agenda today that we want to go over. We want to give you first a status report on where we are with the backlog reduction. Then we want to talk about the online capabilities that we are developing on our Title V permit. And there's a new tool that we are developing on, it's the Permit Application Status Dashboard tool. So we want to offer you a preview what that tool is going to look like, and you're going to be hearing a lot more about this in the future. And it's a tool that will give the public or an applicant to go in and see what the status of their application is. If it's moving, if it's getting stuck, why it's getting stuck, so it will give you a lot more transparency on the process, and it will help you as an applicant or as a public member of the public. It will help us in smoothing out our operations. And at the end of the agenda, it's open discussion. If you guys want to bring up a different topic, we can go ahead and talk about those as well. So if you don't mind, with that, we are just going to dive in. And we're going to start with the first
Bill
item.
Quinn emailed saying, just to let you know, he's on the line.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Good morning, Bill. And I know you can respond back. So let's go ahead and go with the second slide. Oh, I got the control over here. All right. So you may recall, a couple of years ago, we started with an aggressive effort to reduce our pending applications backlog inventory figure, and we had set for ourselves a 50% reduction target over a 2-year period. And that effort came to an end at the last June, at the end of last quarter. And I'm happy to announce in 2 years, We managed to reduce the pending application inventory by more than 50%, 51% to be precise. So we exceeded our target, and we managed to accomplish this by looking at every aspect of our operation and improve our production capabilities. And if you look at the way we have been processing permit applications prior to the commencement of this effort, basically our production rates were almost equivalent to the application inflow rate that we're receiving, sometimes at par, sometimes better, sometimes a little less. But right after we commenced the backlog reduction effort, we managed to improve our production rates dramatically, as you can see with the green bars, far exceeding the application intake rate, and that is what has contributed to us reducing down the permit application inventory. So if you go back 2 years back to where we started, we basically started with 7,300, 7,400 pending application inventory, and we were including there everything in the kitchen sink, from PCs issues to POs pending and what have you. But if you would exclude the PCs issued, which do serve as temporary permits to operate, actually the figure was a little over than 5,000, around 5,300, 5,400. So, and if you look at the last 3 months, we have basically crossed over the 50% reduction line. And if you look at the last 2 pairs, we are giving you the remaining pending application inventory in much greater granularity. It's less than 3,600. And if you exclude the PCs issued, it's less than, I can't say that far, 2,500. Still, there are a few left in the red zone that we are struggling. These are the dogs that we are trying to get rid of. Suddenly, the work progressively got more and more difficult because it takes more time to get rid of those very old applications. But nevertheless, we are on the right trajectory. And even though we met our targets, we are not going to declare victory. We are going to try to continue our efforts and do even better. As you all know, we are going through the reclaim transition, and we know that there will be an additional workload coming our way. So to the extent we can, we'll try to establish some cushion to absorb that additional workload that we anticipate to obtain. If you look at the targets that we had established in the past, we wanted to be able to process 7,000 applications during the calendar year, and more than 1,800 applications, permits to construct in any given year. And for both years, the first year of the backlog reduction effort and the second year backlog reduction effort, indicated with the dark green and light green bars, we exceeded those targets by a pretty healthy margin. And even though things got progressively better, progressively harder in the second year, we still managed to exceed those targets. And where we are with our permit application inventory today is the best that we have ever achieved in the last 30 plus years. So it's a pretty good spot to be in. So, and as I said, we are going to continue these efforts to and seek to establish a cushion to absorb the reclaim transition. And that's all I have. We'll be providing you with those status reports periodically every time we meet, so that you know where we stand. But I'm going to open it to Q&As. If you guys have anything that you would like to add or comment, this is a good time.
Rafi, just going back to the pending application.
Yes.
So the red and the orange ones, why are they taking so long to process? Are they really complicated applications? Or? What's an example of one?
Right. It's typically more complicated applications, and the predominant factor is there is missing information, and there is, in order for us to be able to process the application, we need to have necessary information to do. And often what happens, if they've stayed in the bin for a long time, sometimes there's personnel change even from the facility, So somehow the information is not coming through, or perhaps, there are still pending source test information. And sometimes there are some policy, arguments back and forth that need to be resolved. I did not show you the size of that red sliver or slice of how big it was when we first started 2 years ago. It was significantly higher. So it's much reduced, but nevertheless, there are a few dollars still remaining that we hope that we'll be able to push out of the door. I think you had it.
I did. I was going to say it's very noticeable, so it's really great. People more regularly know that when they submit an application, it's going to come back in some reasonable time. It maybe a next step to think about would be actually setting. People want to know what's going to happen.
Yes.
Maybe set, if you can, some targets of if it's a boiler engine control system. Our goal is to get that done in 3 months, 120 days, or I don't know, some goals for yourselves, so that there's a little more, sort of that next step of measurement internally, and also sort of externally, then people have a little more understanding of how long something will take. It's really helpful if people know, I'm going to submit a spray booth application, I need to do that, I need to plan for, 2 months or 3 months for that. It's really helpful. Because now when people ask us, we go, well, it could take 2 weeks or it could take 2 years. That uncertainty is hard for applicants to work with. So maybe just a next step, but it's wonderful. It is working much better.
It's a good suggestion, and frankly, we are moving in that direction. That's our intent too. We are having some difficulty. We looked, for instance, at prior stats, how long it takes to process an equipment, and the numbers are all over the map, right?
They are,
but nevertheless, I understand the dilemma and the ask. So what we are trying to do with some of the online tools that we are developing, actually, we are trying to shortcut that logjam and give the applicant the ability actually to process his own or her own application. And for things that would normally take, weeks, months, sometimes you can literally, if you have all the information together, you'll be able to get your permit, at least for the easy stuff, for the ones that we can develop those programs, online programs, you'll be able to get them, in a matter of half hour, 1 hour, if not longer, which is a paradigm shift, compared to how we have been doing business right now. The other thing that we are working on, and it's part of the agenda today, the dashboard tool that we are developing, actually, it will help us, it will help you, the applicant, it will help you, the consultant, to try to get closer to what you were suggesting we should do, because we'll try to telegraph to the world basically what's going on with the permit application. It's the anatomy of the process. So if something gets stuck somewhere, the applicant will have the ability to know how long it's going to take, and why it's getting stuck. Is the ball, the district's court? Is the ball up in my court? So it's the quality of information that currently doesn't exist. So anyhow, but no,
I will
comment is
understand
well
that.
taken.
That's right.
Another thing is we're going to try to hold ourselves to a higher standard. So
that's great, and that's awesome.
Another paradigm shift that we're going for.
So when we put, thank you for reminding me this, when we put our action plan together 2 years ago to reduce the backlog, one of the principles that we embraced was the continuous improvement principle. Even though we met our targets, we are doing great, the trajectories are where we all wanted to be.
Right,
We don't want to declare victory. We want to do better. You
Right.
know? Raise the bar, so.
right. And I'm sure you face the same thing we do. The biggest hurdle is getting the information.
Mhm.
I mean, right, we go through the same thing.
Right.
So part of that public outreach and understanding, getting people understanding, I'm pointing over to Janice, helping people understand what's needed in the application. Why do you need the specs? Why do you need, all these parts?
Mhm.
That's super important too, because the more we educate, and this is something we do a lot of, but the more we educate people, applicants, of what needs to be in that application so that it can be processed
Sure.
quickly,
Yeah.
that's huge.
Yeah, and perhaps we can do a better job on that too, because it's an enigma even in my mind. If you look at our rules, it basically spells out, what is needed. How good that list is, I don't know. So I'll be
Right.
relying on some feedback from you guys, whether we need to
Right.
improve that,
Right,
and how we can better communicate that.
right.
Yeah, I've also brought it up in the past, it's about streamlining forms.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that really needs to be looked into.
Mhm,
That's the
mhm.
next step.
Okay. By the way, it's not part of our presentation, is it, that we are phase two? Okay.
Maybe next time.
Maybe next. What? I can share it with you. There's nothing secret about it. So we are going to brief you on the online tools, brief status report, right? The online tools that we have developed thus far. We converted those forms associated with those permit applications to electronic format. But our goal is within the next 6 to 12 months to convert all our forms to electronically fillable and submittable forms. And once we do that, we want to get rid of the paper application concept altogether and move to the electronic forms. So,
Yeah,
anyhow.
that's good about what I meant was the actual information that's implied in the form.
Okay.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's way too detailed.
To detail.
Yeah, I mean, they ask a lot of design criteria,
Mhm.
and then we put that information in there, and then it comes back as a permit requirement, and there goes the pattern of the conditions and it limits flexibility of the permits. So I would like to believe that do you really need all this detailed design information in the app?
Mhm.
So that's what I'm doing.
I see. Okay. Now, I don't know who was first.
You bet.
Dave was first. Okay.
So wanted to congratulate you on the reduction in the backlog. That's a great achievement. Really happy that you're going that direction. Happy that you're not just stopping at that. We're getting better and better. And similar to what Terry was saying, something the SCAP folks, the wastewater folks have been asking for is just policies and consistency.
Yes.
Where it'd be very helpful to know what you want, know what the policy is, and then have a lot of consistency between permit engineers. At least with my members, I'll have someone come in and say, hey, I got this permit with certain conditions, and it may not reflect what someone else got.
Right.
So this should be a little bit more consistency, at least that would make sense to me. And I was gonna show you, I didn't print out a copy, but I was telling you the other day, there's an example of something I don't think we want to go in the direction of having such specificity in a permit that if you have any change in the field that require a permit revision. So example I usually use is like, okay, you have a tank or you have a pump or something, you specify it so specifically and it has nothing to do with air emissions. But if you change that, an inspector comes out and says, oh, well, this is different than your permit, you really should change it.
Okay.
So I have a permit that, I don't know, it's like 20, 30 items that had length, width, height, size of the tank, when it's not related to air emissions.
Okay.
And it's that type of thing that maybe is a policy or something that educate permitting staff of, if you don't have to have that level of specificity, don't. And I think there's a nuance between what EPA needs for Title V facilities, but certainly for minor sources, you should have greater flexibility in saying, let's not be so specific when it doesn't relate to emissions. Or maybe it'd be flexible in saying, the tank cannot be any greater than X. And if they need to change it out, as long as it's less than that, no harm, no foul.
Yeah. I think these are reasonable comments, and definitely I wholeheartedly agree with the uniformity to the extent we can.
It's really a question for you as far as how to start a process of identifying low-hanging fruit of what'll get you the most bang for your buck to streamline things.
Right. And probably, this is probably the best forum. I mean, that's why we exist, you know, to be frank with you. And I know we started with you and your organization, you know, and we've made some progress, but I would suggest, you know, let's do it here. You know.
It is something that would be helpful to have a policy that you can post on the website, so anyone that's
Oh,
not sure of
absolutely.
something
Yeah.
would be listed.
I mean, if we can, I mean, that's the best way of doing it. You know, we can develop the policy, we can post on the web, and take it from there.
That'd be appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just following on David's comments real quick. I guess historically, one of the issues, same type of issue, one of the issues we've seen with permits is where they'll reference specific requirements out of a rule, very specific conditions, and then the rule might change at some point in time, and then we end up having to come back to the district and getting the permit change to match the new rule requirements, even though it had nothing to do with the specific equipment. So, I mean, historically, we've just seen that occur over time, and so I don't know if that's, and when we talk to permit engineers, it's, I mean, a lot of the times we just, oh, well, this is more to help the applicant make sure they're meeting all the requirements, but at the end of the day, what happens is then it results in revisions that might really not have needed to be done. And so that's just a comment in the same vein.
Yeah.
It's just where instead of referencing the rule, we reference we take the identical language just right out of the rule and put it into the permit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know, just some thought, and I know it's back and forth. I mean, it's hard to, but I have an issue going on with that right now, and it's just going to take revisions of the permit, but it's just the way the permits are structured sometimes right now.
And you're saying it's becoming an issue when the rule changes, or?
Yeah, the rule might change, and so then and usually not, but there are times when we actually get some changes that are beneficial to the underlying permit, but then we have to go in and make changes to the permits that it applies to. So.
As a matter of principle, if we can do certain things that will minimize the need for a permit amendment, I think we
and that's what
all agree, you know, that's a very desirable thing to do, even though I'm having difficulty actually. It will be a lot easier if we have some specific examples so that I can see.
I can give one that's
Okay.
fairly common, like instead of saying, you know, this boiler shall comply with Rule 1146, it'll say you must source test once every 5 years because that's the way it was when it was written, but now it's, you know, more frequently, right? So then people don't even know what they're supposed to be doing.
Oh, I see.
Because they'll say, they'll, you know, argue with us, go, no, my permit says I only have to test once every 2 years because that's what my permit says. And then we'll say, well, no, the rule now says, because it's been changed. So it causes confusion in several different ways, because if they wrote into the rule specific, if they wrote into the permit specific rule language, and then the rule changes, it's
And then we had the opposite.
bad,
So I mean, we had 1146 change in 2008 required more frequent, and the new rule we were allowed to do less frequent testing, but we couldn't make use of the provision
permit condition
until the permit went through EPA Region 9 and was approved.
Got it.
And so it's.
So, what is the solution?
It's a balance.
More prescriptions or less prescriptions?
It's a balancing act, because, I mean, obviously the larger company is very aware of all the rule requirements and the district's trying to make sure, I mean, smaller companies know the specific requirements they have to meet, but, so it is somewhat of a balancing act, but it's just something that maybe we can look at and just as we go down the road and it.
Okay. I mean, these are good comments alongside with the uniformity, I guess. You know, that's something that maybe together we can strive to achieve, you know, moving forward.
And uniformity always, and we see, though I haven't seen it lately, but historically, like even emergency IC engines, I mean, within a group, like if Amir's group is processing them, they'll all be pretty much identical, but then if it comes out of another group, all of a sudden we'll see slightly different changes. And so that would all be helped by, if it's the same type of equipment, just uniform.
For that specific
permit
example,
conditions.
for emergency IC engines, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but there should not be much difference, okay? I mean, that's a very valid concern, and they should be all the same. Now, there may be some other equipment where it may be a little bit harder to strike uniformity, and one thing that comes to my mind is, take a boiler, for instance, right? If it's a natural gas-fired boiler, an argument can be made, hey, the permit conditions should be almost uniform, right? But these folks, in the sanitation districts, if they're operating that boiler with, say, digester gas or landfill gas, it may necessitate, it may warrant, slightly different, more tailored conditions. But for emergency IC engines, which all operate pretty much on the same fuel, they should be pretty standardized. So.
And this is something we've discussed in the past as far as if there is a permit and it's been vetted, and sort of, hey, this is kind of where we're going with it, to somehow share it. Maybe you have it up on the website. Say, here's an example of current permits. So the next one down the line can say, oh, well, this is typical conditions I might expect.
Okay.
That may be helpful in itself.
One thing that we are planning to do, and it is part of our action plan, but we have not started yet, but we intend to, is to update our permit processing handbook that we have not touched for, I don't know how many decades. How many? 25? 20? 25 years?
Yeah.
It's a long time. And our intent was, we have 10 permitting units in our office, to basically start with perhaps the most popular or higher frequency processes, Start developing some white papers, some templates, and put them out on the web, so people, applicants, or whoever wants to take a look at how we go about in process environments. It's right there, and even internally we can use those as templates.
And if you remember, because back in the day when we actively used that, there were standardized conditions. We have to. It's good and wonderful to have standardized conditions, but we have to not be afraid also of the ones that just don't fit in the mold.
Exactly.
We have to be comfortable with tailoring something for a unique
situation. Exactly. And I'm glad that you are bringing it up, because there are distinct advantages in having the cookie cutter approach. It streamlines things, but on the other hand, you really don't want to give away the ability to perhaps negotiate, some specialized, tailored conditions that may be warranted.
That's right.
That's valid.
You have some.
Go ahead.
And I'll come back just a second. Did we finish?
Yeah.
Oh,
No, I wanted to dovetail on what everybody else said, and I think the white papers would help. Because I know I've heard from a lot of my members that there is inconsistency amongst the different permitting engineers, and then especially once they get to the supervisory level, a lot of times they'll work on a permit, they'll get through the cursory stages, through the engineers, and then once it gets to the supervisor, it'll basically have to go back. And ask for a lot more information, go through the steps all the way again, which takes a lot of time.
I hear you guys. I think it's going to help, and it's going to take some time to develop those, because, but we felt we don't have to come out with a complete product. We can start with 1-2 processes per each team, put them together, and every quarter, every year, keep adding to it, so it's going to be a living document, but I think it will help all parties involved, and bringing all of us, on the same page, basically.
That'll help. The other nuance to this is when we do permitting once in a while, we'll run across a situation where someone's agreed to a certain permit condition, and now that's a standard applied to others following. And if that is a policy decision saying this is now the standard that we're going to utilize, it'd be nice to let people know. Rather than finding out during negotiation that this is something that's now a new standard.
Right.
Go ahead.
Now, somebody wanted to say something. Oh, let's go.
I just got to point out that every permit that's issued is on the website, especially sole source, and we're soon to have major source, and they can be searched by equipment description, not by facility. If you go to the public document search page, you can go in and search by description, and you search by date range, so you can see what, for a given description, what types of those permits are being issued.
Right, at least with the CPP applications, we're supposed to write the conditions. So what we do, of course, like any good permit engineer, we go back to others and put them together. So we really do have a big library already of really what should be standard conditions. I think it won't be too hard to put together here. I'm volunteering for Amir, but I don't think it's too hard.
It's not. I'll be honest with you. You know, the first 2 years, I mean, 110% of our effort, of our energy was invested in reducing the backlog and stuff. You know, so we really didn't have, you know, the opportunity to do anything else.
Right.
But all we are saying is, even though we are on the right trajectory, you know, and we are very proud of what we have accomplished, there's a lot more that can be done. And these are among these are all on our to-do list, you know, that we can start, you know, shortly.
Just like the plate is getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah. By the way, Scott Johnson is our on-base guru, you know, so and he's the one who's helping us. He's with our IM department, but he's the one helping us with our own capabilities.
Lucky, what on the subject, kind of good dovetail as far as, you know, the reason all this is important is so you don't get a ticket. I mean, everyone wants to be in compliance. And that's kind of, we were talking the other day as far as one thing that we used to do at this table, permit streamlining, is when Mosen was here, he dealt with enforcement. So we kind of got guidance on enforcement at the same time. Because when you get a permit, you want to be able to comply.
Sure.
And there's been not a good way to vet issues with enforcement. And that's something we're talking about. Maybe enforcement can come to some of these meetings. And part of, you know, streamlining and saying, what is it that enforcement needs versus what should be in a permit to just discuss what's necessary.
Right. And even though our office is not dealing, we had an amicable divorce, you know, with the compliance side of our house, we can definitely invite them to our meetings. If there are issues that you want us to discuss, we can advertise them. Call me, call Amir. We'll be more than happy to include in our agenda, invite them over. Look, there are quite a few individuals sitting in the back, you know, they represent the different units of engineering and permitting, but we'll be happy to invite, you know, enforcement and compliance folks as well. So, yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Okay. Gene.
Hi. Yeah. So, what were the major contributors to being able to reduce this cycle time, if you will, by 50%? Did we add more engineers?
Well, actually, no. We were working harder, smarter. You know, we did not add more engineers necessarily. We did not expand our ranks, but we did reduce our vacancy rate. We used to nurse pretty high vacancy rates, like 22, 24%. Obviously, it was not conducive for us to reducing the backlog, so we dropped them down to maybe 12%. But we did not go beyond our budget allocated to engineer count. Another thing that we did was we did promote a few additional senior engineers, and the senior engineers is the first line supervisors reviewing proposed permits. So we had more eyes basically dedicated in reviewing things and passing things through. So that has also helped tremendously. We have looked at the way we've been processing applications. We try to standardize some of our, update some of our policies. So there's not one silver bullet, you know, there was a combination of things. But everybody basically was put on alert, you know, and we were bringing people over the weekends, work a little bit harder. We expanded 40 hours to 50, 60 hours. We have a lot of tired engineers up to 2 years, but nevertheless, you know, it took all these efforts, you know, to bring it down to 50%.
So you recovered some time, and now moving forward, it sounds like through your continuous improvement and some of these new online electronic measures.
To make those gains sustainable.
Yeah.
And that's the goal.
And we want to add more and more tools as we move forward that will give you, the applicant, the opportunity to do some of your own homework, rather than relying on us, and we won't be able to do it with everything, and I know Bridget is not going to like what I'm going to say right now. It may be difficult to develop online tools for WESPA members because they're so complex, they're like in the refineries. But for the smaller, the cookie cutter types, spray booths, or gas stations, dry cleaners, I think we should be able to do that. And we are that close, to.
Collision industry is right at about, for a lot of us, on the cusp of that 25-year and moving forward to some of these NOx emission improvements. And so I would imagine you're going to see a strong flux by 2020. And I'm just basing it on some of the California Auto Body Association members and the age of their equipment and what their future holds.
Okay. That's an important piece of reconnaissance for us. We should be ready for it. So 2020, there is a magic time frame.
I think so.
Yeah, there's a lot of them.
Okay.
I'm already backlogged till the middle of next year.
Look, what we are doing then with this Facebook tool is even more important now.
It is.
Okay, good to know. Memo to the file, huh? 2020. All right. Very good. Okay, so, set on this item, I thought it was going to be only a minute or two, All right,
Okay.
Let's go with the second item. I think, Amir, you're next, right?
Yes, Title 5, posting online. Okay, so we had previously reported that one of the items that came out of the EPA's audit was that they wanted us to post all of our Title 5 permits online. And with that in mind, we put some goals for ourselves on how to accomplish this. Of course, the first goal would be getting all the Title 5 permits online, as EPA wanted. And then the second part was that to try to develop a paperless processing system for posting the permits. So what have we done and where are we with our process? We have tried to automate our processing system, meaning all the way from the time that the engineer starts generating the permit to where the seniors and supervisors are going to review and of course the final approval by the senior engineering managers. This way we're making sure that there's consistency among all the activities that are being done by all different groups. The second thing that we have done is we have looked at the way that we have issued the permits in the past, and we're going to move away from what we had done in the past. In the past, every time you modified your permit, you would get only the section that was being changed. As part of this process, we're going to be issuing the entire permit every single time there's a modification. So every single time, you will have a complete permit in your hand instead of trying to going in there and consolidating the sections and making sure everything's in the right place. This way we figured out everybody will have the same copy of the permit and there will be less compliance issues. If the inspectors come, they might have an earlier version, you guys might have a later version. That will solve because the permit will have all the sections in it. Now, since we don't have all of our permits electronically available, what we're planning to do is we're going to be reissuing all these permits at the beginning of the process. So you will be getting reissued permits that states that, here's your reissued permits. Nothing will be changed in the permit, except it's just going to be done administratively just to give you, to start the process with that electronic copy. And currently we're testing the program with one of our engineering teams, so making sure that we're taking out all the kinks and other issues out of the process, so it would be a smooth transition. However, we're not going to be sending all the Title V's to the facilities, to all of our facilities at the same time. We're going to start doing it gradually, and hopefully if we get everything, all of our ducks in a row, my hope is that we're going to be able to send you guys the revised permits, hopefully by end of the year. So, what is this? Pardon me?
This year?
Yes.
Okay.
I know it's on my performance evaluation. I gotta get it out.
You're on the record.
I'm on the record. So what does all this mean to you folks as being the applicants? So we will be sending your copies of your permits via email. So the old process that you will be getting, that traditional cover letter, it's going to go away because the content of the cover letter is not going to be covered in the email. It will highlight all the changes that have been made to the permit, and it basically will allow us to keep track of all those cover letters internally also. So then we know at what point what was sent out and what permit was issued, with regards to that modification that was made. And as I explained before, we will be sending you guys the entire permits instead of the sections. But what we're also doing is in that email content, we will give you 2 hyperlinks. The first hyperlink would be an image version of the signed Title V permit. And it's an image version, so it's a PDF image, which is not searchable. But what we're also planning to do is, in the same email, we'll give you a second hyperlink, which provides you a searchable, unsigned PDF format of the same permit. And the reason we're giving you the hyperlinks is because we were afraid that the image version of the permit that we're sending out, it would be too large for some of the larger facilities, and it may not actually go to the mail system. So instead of sending an email that was going to bounce back, we're just giving you a hyperlink. Now, what we're also planning to do is we're going to follow the initial email with a second email that will have the searchable PDF file in it again. So, if you don't have, you didn't want to look at the hyperlink, or you might have issues with the hyperlink for the searchable PDF, we're going to follow it up with the second email, making sure that, you get a copy of the unsigned PDF version. And let's see. Okay, so the next item is, of course, if we're sending you an electronic copy, we don't see any reason why we need to send you any more paper copies. So once we start the process and you were notified that this is your electronic version, we will let you know that from that point on, all of our communications with the company would be electronically when it comes to their Title V permit process. So all the Title V permits are going to be sent electronically, no more paper copies. And we figured out, well, this will help saving some trees, but also will allow us to electronically keep track of what we have sent. And also, again, as I explained earlier, it will allow us to make sure everything is done systematically, and we have a systematic way of approaching these Title V permits.
So just quick question. So who are they going to be sent to the responsible official, or are they going to be sent to the contact person?
We will send it to the responsible official, we will send it to the contact person, and if you require additional individuals to be included in the email, we will do that. Because it's an email, we can do that quite easily, and we will just add the names to the emails.
I was only asking because historically we've had issues sometimes. For whatever reason, something might get sent to the responsible official, and then it just
never made it to
disappears.
the
Yeah. So we never see it.
I was going to suggest you put on the 400A or somewhere to what addresses does this permit get sent, and just put it right on there and have people fill that in.
And then just knowing email, my employer is very good about filtering out spam. Is there a way to have a confirmation, that way you know it's been received?
I guess we can.
That's when you turn around.
Dr. Scott Johnson.
Because the IT
We know
securities are
generally
really
that it's,
good.
we're putting our best detector to say that it didn't get bounced. Sometimes, depending on how your spam filters work, if they, we won't know it. I've got built-in stuff that will detect the possible way that we can tell if it's been sent. So we put the best technology we have. Read receipts aren't practical because most of the time, most companies have filters to stop read receipts. So they're pretty useless, although I could easily turn those on the communication.
And if that doesn't work, I don't know what the dashboard we're saying where the status is. If it says emailed, that's another way to check.
Absolutely. Like I said, it's now electronic. So we have total control of who can receive it, when we can send it, but also more importantly, once we start the process, that Title V permit is accessible through our public document search. So you know, if you haven't received it, and you know, it's going to be available online for everybody. So it's just not for the facility, but it's also going to be available for public. Which brings me to the next part, which is the benefits of doing this. We're giving direct access to public to see the Title V permit, and also to the facilities. If you want to see your latest Title V permit, it's available. It's online, and you can see the copy of the whole permit instead of the piecemeal version that we were doing in the past. And you know, there was a reason why we did it in the past, because you know, we thought that by just giving you the sections, we don't have to print the entire permit. But at this time, in the 21st century, I think we can do better, and we can do it electronically and just move forward with that whole concept.
Two things that come to my head as far as that sounds great, but one thing we've seen when we look at the whole permit, do we know it's changed?
Yes.
Is there going to be something that's going to highlight what's changed?
Well, the highlight would be again in the email, what was changed, and we're not changing the format of the table of content. So the table of content still will have the version numbers, so each section will still have the latest version number and the date that it was issued, and the table of content will reference that information.
Okay. And then the other thing, as far as the communication with the permittee, would there be the same type of transaction for a draft conditions to review before it goes to EPA?
Yeah, again, you know, this is, we're not changing any of that part. This is how we're generating the permit. Once it's generated, of course, the engineers will be contacting you guys, saying, here's a copy of the draft permit. Especially if you mark that checkbox in the form, I want to see a copy of my permit. And please do that, you know, so that, you know, we know that you guys want to see it. But all that stuff is happening prior to the final permit being submitted or sent out to the facilities. So these are the background stuff. We're not changing any of the background stuff. The only thing that we're changing in the background is, you know, how we were generating the permit. You know, we have alternate format, we had the reclaim format. We're trying to make sure everybody's doing it the same way throughout the division. Make sure everything is done the same way, and then send the permits electronically.
Yeah, it's great, and it's a great idea, and we should do that. One thing maybe just to be mindful and careful about is when you receive your modified or new permit, you have a 30-day clock, right, to appeal the terms of the permit. So if we're going to electronic, it is important to make sure it was received, because we do have issues with emails getting diverted. I think, Ryan, I had one that went into the junk mail, which shouldn't have. So I think there is a step that is going to be important, because facilities have that 30-day legal requirement if there's a problem.
You know what we could
so
do?
So something, maybe something to...
Yeah. You know, we can probably maybe do some internal checking also.
One thing that we can do is, in publicizing this stuff, is identify the email address that we are going to be sending out under, and then you can whitelist that email address.
Right.
Yeah, because it's going to be a special email address.
Yeah. It's just something to think through as you work through that process.
The emails are going to be, the way we originally designed it was it's going to be coming from the manager or whoever signs the permit. It's either going to be one of the managers, or it's going to be Amir, Rocky, Wayne, or Jill.
Right.
It's basically those, whatever, 6 or 7 addresses.
Right, and then, but somehow maybe on the receiving end, you need to confirm that there is a recipient who gets it.
And we use the technology to identify, if I get a bounce back message, I send an email to the appropriate people internally that there's a bounce. But only if it depends on how you're doing your filters and stuff. If it just goes into your junk folder, I might not get a notice. And so there's limitations on the technology I have available.
Right. But like someone like Bill is going to be common. You're part of the Boeing, computer system. He can't control all those things.
Right.
But I'm sure he emails with his permit engineer. So there's some communication, right? So as long as there's maybe there does need to be an acknowledgement that, yes, I did receive it, some handshake. Because again, it shouldn't be just left to, well, you have to search on your website because
No. Well, of course, remember, we're giving
Bill's
you a
not
hyperlink.
looking every day. You
No,
know?
no, I think he is.
You know, I think that's-
yeah. Request to reply to an address.
Maybe that's,
And then I can have
confirmation.
before, and then I can automate that and then
Right.
feed that back to the system if you want. I mean, that's very technically doable from the architecture that we're using. I mean, it's very simple technology that uses a simple reply on the email with the confirmation that you
Received it. Yeah, I think you need something like that because that 30-day clock is super important because we've had situations where an error got put in, but we needed more time to get it resolved. And so, we use that to put a doorstop in to stop the door from closing until we can get it fixed because
That's a
otherwise
very
we'd be in non-compliance. And
It's a very good point.
yeah,
To
so,
look into it.
yeah.
So I think from the industry side, I think you should ask the industry who is a focal person to receive this email. Because if you were to send it to our responsible official, our refinery manager won't even look at it at all. It's gonna
Right.
let it sit. Yeah. So it would be helpful if you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that would be done. Like I said, we have to send a copy to the responsible official. There is no ifs or buts questions about it. We have to send a copy to him. We have to send one to the contact person. But we're more than happy to expand the list of the recipients. There's no problem with that one.
Now, why do you have to, because you don't do that now? I
Yeah,
mean,
we
right
do.
now,
It goes to contact
right
person.
now, it always goes to the contact person, and that's where we ran into problems, and for some reason, sometimes it'll go to the responsible
person.
official, and then I'll never get it. And
Right.
it just disappears, but I mean, the normal process is that it just goes to the contact
Well,
person.
I think the design process for the Title V permitting was that ultimately the responsible official stated on the permit is going to be the main person that should be aware of what is happening with the facility. So that's why, you have that in the Title V permit. So if there is an issue that comes up, the responsible official cannot state that, oh, I wasn't aware of that, that what was happening in my facility. Now, I know this doesn't happen, but that was a safeguard that I think EPA put that as part of the development of the Part 70 program. But then, like I said, we have no problem, once we go to this electronic route, we will put as many recipients as you guys wish on our list of emails for distribution costs.
I wonder, would we have the opportunity, we have the contact persons, for a particular facility. If the facility itself wants to add additional names, is there any way to automate those email addresses?
We have to look into it.
Some stuff, there's some stuff, it's just a matter of the security on the screens, and so that's where it becomes a problem, is that we would have to be issuing accounts to people to access those things and managing it. It's not that that sort of thing is technically difficult, it's that you would have to create accounts for the facility to manage those things, and that would would probably be involved in that side of the.
And I don't know, I mean, at least speaking for us, I mean, as long as it was, I mean, we identify, the responsible official, but the contact person, that's identified, as part of the Title V process, and as long as it's going to those two, that's what we determine is supposed to be getting all that information.
Yeah, those two are all, it's automatic. It's just that if you want a third person, a fourth person,
Well, that I don't,
you can notify your engineer, permitting engineer, and then we'll make sure that happens.
I suppose, maybe I didn't ask you that right away. So let's assume, we've got his facility manager and plus Bill, is our contact person. Bill retires tomorrow, and he has a replacement, and the replacement wants to be the recipient of the email to provide with the opportunity to basically reshuffle the names. Yeah.
So now that we did work through
the permit.
And get it
I was trying to figure out whether we could automate the process, we don't have to go through that, so it's.
Well, no, there is a whole form that needs to be filled out.
Okay.
for tracking purposes.
You could always make it simple, but the way it is right now, right, we need to file a.
And for security purposes, perhaps, you know, I mean, it is with the Title V.
I mean, how do you guys think this is gonna take to the body shop world?
It won't.
It won't. You're not a Title
Because,
V.
yeah, these are for major sources.
You don't have to worry about
Yeah. No worries for you guys. We have a handle through the online tool for you guys.
But it should.
Yes.
But it should. These emails, these electronic permitting, I mean, why should we get it, you know, through snail mail, you know?
And, you know, I remember as part of, I mean, we had some discussions on the permit stream for the spray booth. Those permits are coming online also. It's just that, you know, we have to expand the whole program to accommodate more facilities than what we're doing currently.
Got it. Well, they have to be a totally different process, because the body shop world isn't good to respond to these.
Just for your benefit, guys, so we have close to, I don't know, 26,000 facilities in our hopper. What we are talking about right now applies to the top 360, how many?
Got it, yeah.
Very, very big guys. So there are additional hoops that these guys have to jump through, and that's what we are trying to streamline, you know, so don't worry about it.
So you gotta remember, I do both. I do automotive and industrial.
Oh, you do? Okay, all right, okay.
Well, some of the facilities might be a major
All
source.
right.
But before I continue any further, I want to introduce Brian Tomasovic. Brian is our from our general counsel's office. He's been working with us throughout this whole Title V process, and I have to apologize to him. I forgot to send him a copy of invite, so that's why it wasn't here at the beginning. So my apologies. Oh, there's another question? Yes.
Well, instead of just doing completely electronic, then you could just send a one-page letter to the address saying, you've updated your Title V.
Well,
With the date on it, saying we're, it did this date, and here's the website you can go to get your permit.
we're trying to move away completely from that paper.
I know, but the legal 30-day thing, it's.
Yeah, well,
once we
let
have an
us,
actual
yeah.
acknowledgement, like the person gets email, and then they have to click on the link and acknowledge they get it.
Yeah, well, let us look into it. I think we should be able to come up with a simpler way than a paper.
An acknowledgement, just.
Yeah. You know, the whole concept with the paper is every time we send a paper, we have to track that paper. And tracking that paper for record-keeping purposes, it becomes a nightmare. And that's why we're trying to, because you never know when, you know, 5 years down the road, what was changed based on what version. And we're trying to, you know, systematically itemize all the changes, when it was done, and how it was done. So this will help both the facilities and us in the future. So we're not looking just for focus on all EPA wants the online Title V, all the Title V's online. We're looking into the future and see what we can do to improve the process from transparency purposes also.
So you're gonna need some kind of, somebody gets the email, they have to click on something to acknowledge they got it.
Yeah, that's an excellent idea. Maybe that would be the way to go.
Yeah.
Just then if you don't get the acknowledgement.
Yeah, some type of confirmation.
Yeah, that's an
Email
excellent
is-
idea.
yeah.
So then also on the Title V that are going online, are you guys gonna include statement of basis?
No.
Plans?
The plans will be there.
Yeah, the application number for the plan will be there.
No, we also will
Oh,
give you
you
the
put the plan
plans.
in there too.
Yeah. So if there are conditions in the plans that you were supposed to be comply with, that will be in the body of the permit. Now, we've done it differently with different teams, where again, we're trying to make sure we have one single way of doing it.
Can you provide the engineering evaluation?
The engineering evaluation, well, the problem with that is that we have to keep track of that for the public records process. And so making it available online, we sort of lose track of it. And then also your engineering evaluation may contain confidential information. So we just don't feel comfortable enough to put that information online. Now, if we send your Title V permit and the evaluation to EPA, that stuff will be online. So again, we discussed this before with the confidential business information, that, if you have confidential business information, please identify it with EPA, because once we send it to them, that becomes public records. With us, we have a little bit more control over it. We would like to at least take a look at who's requesting We're gonna provide the information, it's just we wanna make sure we put it to our public records process.
And we have a quick question, who's actually gonna send the email?
The email,
Yeah. The
it's going, it's probably going to be, if I'm, Scott, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's coming from the senior engineering manager.
No, the email's gonna come from whoever signs the permit.
Whoever signs
Who
it.
actually is gonna send it?
No, that's the email address.
But who's gonna click the email to send it to?
It's not a click to send, it's automated, so, and so when, after the manager or DO, ADO, EO, COO, presses the button to say approve,
Oh.
they press a button that says approve in the background, because there's things that have to happen to consolidate all these pieces and stuff, and there's an automated system that sends the email under that person's name.
You know, as I,
This is a different.
you know, as I explained before, there's a lot happening behind the scenes. But as far as the applicant is concerned, he's still getting the same permit. We're doing a lot more internally to making sure this happens, and we're keeping track of everything that is happening.
So it is a commitment to EPA that we are trying to fulfill, but it was an issue that brought up by several of you, and I don't know, Dave and Bill, you know, both of you come to my mind. I think you had asked, you know, hey, the paper, you know, Title V permits are fine and done, but can't we get them electronically, you know, ahead of time? Do we ever need to wait for that long? And I think that will address, you know, that issue, so. But anyhow, when did you say we are gonna do this,
Very soon.
Oh,
Next Friday?
When you put that Title V permits online, are you gonna have, like, different versions, like the last 5 years?
You can, those versions should be available online
All the
too.
versions?
No, it's
We're
just gonna
putting
be-
day forward, it's gonna be
Yeah.
starting from the first one that was issued through the new system. The other ones, we don't necessarily have the complete
Right.
permit, we have pieces of what was issued.
But like going forward, like, you get a new version, you guys post it,
Yeah.
I can look at each version.
Every
Yeah.
version that was issued through the system will be available online for everybody to see.
Right. Yeah, so like I said, we don't have complete copies.
Right.
So we're trying to initially go through that process to create all the copies and make it available. And then from that point on, we're gonna be able to track them all. Yes?
Yeah, so going back to this idea of posting entire permit rather than just the modified sections, actually at least for OCSP, it's been that way from the beginning. We've been getting full copy of the Title V permit along with the modified sections, and then, you know, we just get full paper copy too. It's like, why is it doing this? It's so much more to the paper. So you're going back to that. I mean, I was hoping that you'll go back to just issuing the modified sections rather than the whole permit. So you're going that way.
Yeah, well, because,
I was wondering what's the
well,
benefit of
the problem is that when we get a public records request, for example, and they want the Title V permit that was issued in 2010. And now we have to start going in there back and forth, trying to figure out which items were issued prior to 2010, what was issued in 2010, put them together, photocopy them, create a PDF file, and then send it out. This way, we figured out we have a complete copy, we don't have to go back, and if public wants to see the complete Title V permit, it's there.
Yeah, but for facilities though, when you get full copies, so you have to go to that page. I think now with electronic it'd be easier because there's no hyperlinks. But at least with the paper copy, it was kind of hard to go through this and search through the entire permit to get to the modified section.
Yeah. Well, remember, you know.
But and also you lose the dates, original issue dates on all these other permits.
No, we're keeping all the dates the same. So it's the same format. Nothing is changing.
Yeah, I know, but then when you look at the Title V permit now, it doesn't have the original issue date nor the revision date.
Well, remember, it's every 5 years we have to reissue the permit. So so as far as EPA is concerned, and Brian can help me because that's what he did in the past, working with the EPA. The renewal date is your new permit. That is the date of your new permit. So the old permit is expired. So if you have a permit that have an expired date on it, you really don't have a permit. So when we issue the renewal with that initial date is the date of the permit. So we have to go with that date. So we can't go back to the initial date that was issued 10 years ago. So your permit, if you look at the section A, it will say the date, permit date and the expiration date. And everything else that's what's going to change within those 5 years. And those things are usually 5 years apart.
Yeah, because actually just recently, I'm working on inactivating some older permits. And then in the form, they ask for the original issue date. And then when I look at the Title V, I only has the most recent date. So it's like, do I have to go back to the paper copies? Yeah, I mean, it's just.
Yeah,
that
but
kind of a-
but you know, if you remember in the text of the permit, the date is usually, well, no, it's
Not
not.
always, yeah.
Not anymore. We took that out with the reclaim from formats. Yeah, it's a little bit more difficult that way. Well, you can just leave it blank, I suppose. We can search it for you.
No, she suggested going to the find.
Yeah, you could do that.
Yeah, you mentioned that like on the cover page, you're gonna mention the changes that were made. So those are intended changes. But sometimes we've seen a permit where a condition gets dropped accidentally or gets added accidentally. So do you compare the two versions of the permit and tell us, those unintended changes too?
No, if there is any change to your Title V permit, it should be reflected. Either in the, it should have been reflected, and that is our policy in the cover page that was sent to you. And it will be reflected in the email that is going to be sent to you. We are not going to send you a Title V permit without letting you know what we have done to that permit.
Amir, maybe another way of saying it is that can you do a red line to show exactly what's changed? If it's in Word, that should be fairly straightforward. I don't know how easy it would be for you.
It's not a Word
That
document.
might be easier, for us anyway.
It would be, yeah. Let us look into it. Maybe we can do, the image version, we can't do anything to it. I mean, it's an image version, and that's your official copy. So we're not going to be redlining anything in your
It would be at the
official
draft
Title V permit.
stage.
The
Really,
draft
that you'd
stage,
want to
that would be better.
see
Right,
that.
that'd be really
Exactly.
helpful. So it's just like in a rulemaking, when they set out a rule and said, this is the revision, and it's not a red line, it's incredibly hard to
It's
see
hard
what
to
the
follow,
changes are.
especially a Title V
Right.
permit that's many, many
Exactly,
pages.
yes.
And even if,
They're really
if you say,
extensive.
I've only changed these pages, I think everyone just, they want to make sure they comply and they read the
Oh,
whole
of
thing.
course.
Right.
And if it was me on the other side, I would do the
Yeah.
exact same thing. So I
Yeah.
completely understand
It's a
what
little
you're,
bit daunting.
what you're
Yeah.
going with it, yeah. And that's why we're giving you a searchable file. So that, you
Right.
can search instead of an image file, which, because we're giving you the blue ribbon on the top with our logos on it, that part, we're sort of keeping to our mind that that's your official permit, and we're not going to let you do any search on it or make any changes to it. But the searchable PDF, you should be able to search whatever you want in it. And like I said, we're giving you a hyperlink, and then we're going to follow it up with the second email. Here's a copy, just in case you don't want to go to the hyperlink.
So stand by, coming to your doorstep soon. Oh, there's another one. Okay.
Chris Flake, City of Los Angeles, Bureau of Sanitation. For the more efficient organizations like Orange County SAM, sending just the modifications might be the thing that they need. But for the City of LA, being the incredible bureaucracy we are, sections get lost. We appreciate getting the whole enchilada. We get new people coming in, gotta find stuff. That it's a whole lot easier if it's just one document has everything. I can empathize with people who say that that's a lot of extra storage in their computers, which is going to be duplicated over so many people who want to have instant access to it. But it needs to be done.
Yeah, but also remember, we're giving you a hyperlink.
Yes.
You don't have to download it. It's
That's
going to be available on our website all the time.
Right, but are we able to download just the modifications or just one section or another?
No, not on the image
The
file.
whole thing or nothing, right?
Well, no, you can do it with the searchable PDF version. It's
We're going to
unsigned,
give you both options.
okay? It's
PDF version and searchable PDF.
And we send it as an attachment. If you don't want to keep the attachment, that's fine. You still have the hyperlink to the searchable permit.
When you put it online and it goes to us and to the public at the same time, is it gonna say like there's a 30-day grace, this get changed in 30 days? Or, the facility has 30 days, you know, we're issuing this now, it's going to public today, but in 30 days this could change. Like, it's really not our, you know,
Final permit.
it is and it isn't.
Yeah. Well,
Because somebody gets it, you put it on the public website, and then 2 weeks later, I send a letter saying, oh, I need this changed. And then we change again.
I think it's effective upon issuance. I don't think there's a delay of effectiveness and
Right,
after
at
30
least,
days.
I think
there
there'd
are
be
for other
confusion if public prints it, and then 2 weeks later it changes, and then they have the wrong version.
There'll be different versions on the website, so
Well, they'll see the second.
Yeah, they'll see everything.
Okay.
They'll see
Everything will be on the website.
But the revision date won't change.
Yes, it will.
It will.
yes,
Every
yes,
revision
yes.
number, every revision, so every one will have a new revision number, so it'll be very transparent that it will have changed, something that, whatever sections changed by that.
So even if there's like a typo, find the typo.
Yeah.
For
We'll do
New version,
it'll have a new version.
new version.
Just for a typo.
Yes, for a type.
That'll be part of our process that will require.
Yeah, you know, we thought about that, and
Yeah.
the reason for it was that, you know, we wanted to keep track of this methodically.
Yeah.
And if once that email goes out, that version is locked. We're not gonna make any changes to that permit under that version. So then the next version, you know, you send us an email, oh, there was a typo. Then we're gonna get an email from us and saying, we corrected the typographical error that was made in the previous version, here's your new Title V permit. We're doing this systematically,
Yeah.
so we can keep track of what is happening in the process.
We are all gonna go through some adjustment.
Yes, it's
you know,
gonna be a little bit
It's gonna be
more
good at the end of the.
Yeah, you're going back up to 7,000,
No.
yeah, it's real fast if you start looking for revisions for a typo. You gotta think,
Yeah.
I think you said think outside the box or
Right.
paradigm shift. In the past, some of your roadblocks were simple revisions, right? And you needed an engineer to make that typographical correction. Get off your seats
Right.
and make a quick decision. I mean, how long would that revision take in today's world? A week, 2 weeks? And it's a typographical error.
Yeah, and it will happen, I mean, you know, we make changes.
Yeah.
It's gonna be really
Well,
fast.
stop doing that.
The typographical error or sending a second copy?
Send it, just make the revision without having an engineer
Too
or
much
approval.
process involved,
Yeah.
yeah. Rick, quickly.
Just one, yes.
Yeah.
Will these searchable permits be made available to other permittees in general public or not?
No, the search permit is only going to the facility. If you want a copy of the searchable PDF version, you just need to go to the public records at this point.
We make a public records request to get that.
Well, are you talking about your own permits
No,
or?
someone else's.
Someone else's, yes.
It just doesn't seem very.
We have to keep track of the information that we send out for each facility. It's part of our legal requirements, just in case we have to prove what was sent out at what time and to whom.
You don't have a record of that electronically? I would expect that.
No, I mean, if LA County, City of LA wants a copy of the Orange County permit, you have to go to a public record process. It would be an electronic submittal, and you will get the document electronically, but we still have to keep track of it.
I cannot understand that you don't have an automatic record of someone downloading documents over time. It just seems that.
Well, they would be able to search using the public document search, but he's just saying that if you wanted the searchable version, that we're restricting it to that. But we do have some
Well-
search tools through the hyperlink that you go to. If you choose to search through our program, you can do some searching. But if you download it, you would need to do like character recognition.
So maybe we can discuss this.
We
want to
can
hear
discuss-
what you're
I think,
saying.
Move on.
We say enough about this. Ron, it's an exciting thing that we are all going to learn through this transition. And I think it will help us, it will help everyone, transparency to begin with, tremendously. But also, if we don't have to be printing, in-house those permits, and keeping all those trees, and spending all that time waiting for those thick permits, to be printed, we'll be saving a lot of permit processing time that we can dedicate in actual permit processing, so it's going to be a good thing. Another part of that, so let's move on to the next item, which is also very exciting. I'm very excited about the prospect of this new tool, which is the permit application status dashboard. Again, another major step in improving transparency and also improving efficiency, both internally as well as externally. And Mitch, are you going to be doing the honors on this?
I believe so.
All right.
So again, I'm Mitch Heimhoff, one of our engineering managers, and we've been working on this new dashboard tool for people to be able to take a look at applications, see where they are in the process. It started under direction of the governing board. They wanted us to make it easier for facilities and the public to see what's happening with applications in real time. So we've been working with our IM department and some contractors to develop this tool. It's not ready yet, but it's coming along pretty quickly. It will increase transparency, and it's going to have a variety of features. There'll be for each application, there'll be 2 graphic indicators for a quick glance understanding of what's happening. One will be sort of a snapshot of the status, and there's 3 possible statuses that will show. If there's a green dot, that means there's no problems, no delays either on the district side or the applicant side, and it's ready for processing. It doesn't necessarily guarantee that at that moment the engineer is actively working on it while you look, but there's no impediment to the engineer working on it. If it's being held up because we're waiting on something from the applicant, additional information requests, source test, what have you, then there will be that middle icon there, looks like a building, indicating that there's a holdup on that side. If we're waiting for something on our side other than the work by the engineer, then there'll be our district logo showing that there's something on our side. And that could be like, for example, CEQA or source test review. And potentially there could be both at the same time. If that's the case, then both of those icons will show. The other graphic indicator would be just an indication of the time elapsed since the application came in. So for anyone outside the agency, to get to this tool, the route will be to go through the existing find and enter the application number of interest. And then that will take you to this application detail screen for the application that was entered. And this is a preliminary mock-up. It's not final. It was actually developed in working with the contractor in developing the requirements. We have written requirements as well as these mock-up diagrams to show what it looks like. So this screen is taken from that. So it's still a work in progress. But it's divided up into sections, and actually the screen is bigger than what you see here. It's in order to not make it tiny to all fit, we cut it in half. So this is the upper half, the next slide will be the lower half. So the big box in the upper left is basically a lot of summary data about the application, identifying the application number, the facility, what type of application it is, what the equipment is, what team it's assigned to, who the engineer is, that type of thing. And then at the upper right, that's that same status indicator I was just describing on the previous slide. And then below that is the elapsed time indicator. In this example, it's in pre-screening. Whenever it's in pre-screening, it'll show the 0 to 30 day in blue gauge. And in this case, if it's in pre-screening, the gauge will always look the same. It'll look like that. It's not going to show that we're 7 days in, or 9 days in, or 50 days into our 30 days. It'll just be the gauge. But then up above the gauge like in this example, it says 11 days over 30. So we went past that. That would indicate that there's additional information request, gave the applicant, we gave the applicant 30 days, 11 days in, so now they have 11 days beyond, that kind of thing. If it's once it's pre-screened and accepted, the gauge, it'll be similar in shape, but instead of blue, it'll have a green, a yellow, and a red zone. For a typical 180-day application, from 0 to 150 days will be green, from 151 to 180 will be yellow, and greater than 180 will be red. And in that case, the needle will be dynamic, and it will point proportionally to where on that gauge it is. And of course, it'll peg on the right at 180 days. And then again, up on the top, it will tell the exact number of days. So this is the lower half of the same screen. The long horizontal box towards the top there is sort of a quick peek look at the progress of the application, showing major milestones that have occurred. So early on in the process, it may just show received and assigned. Later on, it'll look like what's here, received, assigned, deemed complete, and PC issued. And then under each of those things, it has the date that that event happened. And if you look closely on the right, there's a written description of the possible statuses that will appear there. And as I said, this is a work in progress. We increased the list from 6 to, I think it's 12. But when we did that, the wording didn't change, so it's still 6, but there are 12 that are listed up there. And then the other big area below that, application history, that'll be all of the detailed steps that have happened in the history of the application. Right now, and for many years, we've had a diary internally that automatically records when an application is received, when it's accepted, when it's assigned to an engineer, who that engineer is, when the engineer recommends a PC be issued, when the supervisor approves that or rejects that recommendation, and so on. So all of those things will appear here. In addition, we're creating new statuses that will appear that are not automatically generated by the system. They'll be manually created by the engineer. For example, if the engineer sends an additional information request and provides 2 weeks to do that, there'll be a line in there, additional information request issued on this date, and the due date is 14 days later. And so there'll be those types of additional levels of information. So if you go in to look at your application and you want to know what's going on, that status indicator will show, or may show, waiting on something from the facility. So obviously, if you don't already happen to have it in your mind, the obvious question is, well, what are they waiting on? What do I need to do? In this area, you'll be able to scroll down and see, oh, it's additional information request. I've got 3 days left, I better get that in, or whatever the case may be. And there may be more than one of those types of things. There could be 2 AI requests. An AI request went out, and then 3 days later, the engineer realized, oh, I also needed another data safety sheet. So there'll be another request for that. They'll both show. If there's an extension on a permit to construct, that'll show. A variety of things will show there. So that's the design of this. In terms of implementation, we've seen like a preliminary semi-working copy for demonstration purposes. Internally, it's not fully working. It's still being developed. Hopefully, it'll be ready soon. We'll have to test it, of course. And then in terms of deployment, the current thinking is that initially it'll be deployed internally probably for a month before it's deployed externally, because all of those statuses like AI request, whatever, they won't be there. Somebody's gonna have to go and manually enter that information. So we'll have some time period for the engineers to backfill that information before it goes live to the public, so that the information is there to be seen.
Will you also be able to access that through the, in the find, in the equipment listing, the application number? Will you be able to go through there? Or you have to go to the home screen?
At this point, you have to go to the home screen and enter an application number.
Okay.
So you can, if you go to that, if you have to go to that list to figure out what the application number is, you can do that. and then it's just a back arrow away
Yeah.
to enter it, so.
Yeah.
So as
Nice,
far, you
that's
said
great.
this would be public for this type of interaction, so if you're going and having a request, or there's something with permit engineer, that would be public. The one pause I have is sometimes there isn't a meeting of the minds, and it takes a little bit to work something out, and if there happens to be a disagreement, you always want that public.
Well, the disagreement won't be there. For example, it may say, we're waiting on an information request.
Mhm.
It's not gonna say, Mr. Rothbart called and disputed the need for that information, and there's an argument going on. It's just say, we're waiting on that information.
You
And
can
then-
put that if you want, but I'm just sort of saying.
And then, when it's resolved, it will be updated to show that it was resolved.
And maybe it goes back to what I thought might be in here, as far as someone who wants to understand what they have to do, what level of detail would be in there saying, this is what is needed? Will it have that level of detail?
No. Probably, no, not that. At that point, you're better off picking up the phone,
Okay.
and calling either Mitch or the engineer, and try to sort it out. But at least, what we are trying to do with this is provide that transparency. Often, what happens, let's say a permit gets stuck, and we tend to do the finger pointing, The engineer will go, oh, I'm still waiting for information from Gene. And Gene will go, no, I provided the information, I don't know how many months ago, This, it tends to address, that issue, so, but if we want to discuss about the details of what is the whole.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting you need to, I'm just I think it's great, it's a
Yeah.
great tool, and it's just a matter of how would it would work.
Right.
So as someone putting in an application, I'd want to know, hey, what do you need, and be notified. So that's
Yeah.
going to be the other question of, since it doesn't have all the detail, would this email the applicant saying, hey, automatically there's a flag, hey, contact the permit engineer?
No,
Well, there
not
will
at
be-
this stage.
There will still be, if the engineer sends an information request, the information request that's always been sent will still happen.
Mhm.
This will just be the documentation that happened. So to know what was requested, you can refer to the email or the letter that was sent.
It's almost like a diary.
Okay, as long as it's.
That is going to be in the public
If
domain.
there's like a yellow light or something saying, hey, it's on pause, that the applicant knows that if there's something on,
Yeah.
that they need to do in response.
Right, and that's what that building icon will indicate, is that there's something that we're waiting on from the applicant, and then the diary will
See,
show what type of something it is.
we are excited about this because even though initially there's going to be a lot of homework on our end, because we'll have to populate the database, but one of the advantages, in addition to improving transparency, it also is improving accountability. Okay, so internally, I'm here managing, will have the ability at the end of the month, at the end of the week, who wants to see, okay, how many yellows or how many reds do I have? We'll be able to have that list, and we're able to go to the engineer and say, hey, how come, we have these many, reds, what needs to be done? It improves that accountability internally, but improves the accountability externally as well. So I think at the end of the day, it will help all sides.
I think it's great.
And we know that it's not going to be a perfect tool, but it's going to be our first hurrah with the understanding. Maybe the next generation or the generation after, will keep improving. But at least it's our attempt to go as transparent as we can, as accountable, as we can, with our process here. So.
Just had one question, the last screen, where you just have your little flow sheet, and the last step, PC, PO, I guess, whatever. One of the items we run into with the system right now is sometimes they'll actually say that the permit's been approved. Then when we call them, talk to Bug a Mirror or something about it, well, it's still like 3 weeks out before it actually is going to get issued. And is that?
So this will indicate that the supervisor approving it has done that approval. It doesn't change the fact that once it's approved, it needs to be printed and mailed.
Okay, so that's what I was curious. And it's just been, because sometimes, and I guess it all depends on
that it will take 2 or 3 weeks for us to print.
It depends on
permit.
I think in the past it's depended on the backlog. Sometimes usually it's pretty immediate, but sometimes it's just
Let me
in
get
our
this email
facility, and the
down.
problem is,
I'm hoping what you're describing are things of the past, you know,
Yeah.
not of the present.
and I am talking about something that's occurred in the past, but it's just, and so it's just curious about,
Yeah, that will, as soon as the supervisor clicks approve, and the system does its magic, sometimes there's a hiccup in it. If it's not successful, it will back into the thing again. But as soon as that action completes, it will update to a PC issue, for example.
Right, so in the diary, we will get to see PC mailed, or mailed.
so there'll be something.
It will be in the
That'll
diary.
be something in there, so that's
Yes.
almost like an additional after
Yeah,
you say approved.
Yeah, no, but even on the diary itself, the
On the
border,
okay.
The box underneath, you will have a date that says PC issued or PC recommended, and then the next one would be PC
Okay, so
mailed.
there'll be, so that's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
But again, one of the benefits of the system would be to give us the feedback that the example that you're describing, is it one-off, is it the exception, or is it a systemic problem? Because if it's the exception, perhaps we can live with it, but if it's a systemic problem, it will allow us, you know, to identify, you know, and fix it. You know, because it should not be happening, what you just described.
I haven't seen
No,
it
I bring up
recently,
history,
more in the
that's fine.
past.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So anyhow, again, and by the way, we should also mention this. Sarkaran, who is sitting quietly in the back, actually it's his and his team that is helping us, you know, in developing, you know, and designing, you know, this system, and they're doing a great job, you know. So, like I said, you know, we are very excited about this tool, and all these tools, whether it's the Title V, whether it's this tool, is moving us, pushing us in the direction of the comments that you made, you know, your starting comments, you know, at the very beginning of the meeting.
Yeah, because then you can see and
Yeah.
start to anticipate and then put things in buckets.
Right.
It's Title V,
Exactly.
it's this, it's not
Yeah.
Title V, it's a boiler, we can get her done,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, any other comments or questions on this at all? Yeah.
This is very good thing to do. I just want to make a comment or ask a question. Sometimes application is submitted for 3 months. I know the engineer is already assigned, working on it, but when I go to find to see what is the status, it doesn't show anything whatsoever. I call and whoever answers right away tells me, yes, this engineer has it. Is there any issue that, at what stage when the application comes in, the system show that application is assigned to this engineer? I want to know, because there are times 3 months after I submit, it still doesn't show any engineer on it.
Right.
And even though in reality it's already assigned.
So perhaps the cryptic aspect of the current system may allow for things to be hidden like that, but with this system, everything will have to be out in the open. And if for 3 months, you know, there's nothing indicated there, that's a red flag for us.
Yeah, I understand that, but I want to know at what, there are times that application after 3 weeks, I can see that shows the assignment to engineer and all that. But there are certain application 3 months later, still doesn't show anything. I just want to know if the engineer get the assignment, it doesn't do pre-screen and doesn't log it in, that's why it doesn't show. Is that what it is?
Yeah, well, hopefully this will resolve it, because we're putting a lot of pressure on engineers to be more responsible with the applications that are received. You know, this is a double-edged sword. It's not only information for you guys, but it's also information for us. Just figuring out what is happening with all the number of applications that we receive. And, you know, I know most of you guys know we receive about 10,000 applications a year. So we try to keep a closer look and a tighter control over it. Now, typically, we try to deliver the applications within 4 business days.
Yeah, so the scenario that Paul is describing should not be happening, should be the absolute exception, you know.
There should be absolute exceptions, but it's an exception that does occur.
If that's the impression that you're getting. We need to hear from you.
Yeah, I just want to know what is the reason? Is it because the person
There's-
who got the assignment
Yeah.
didn't pre-screen, that's why it doesn't show, or there's some other issue?
Well, the direction and the way we've moved in the last 1 to 2 years. As soon as we get that application, and within 4 days, it has to be disseminated, assigned, so. And by and large, I can say, this is the stat that we have seen earlier, 98, 99%, we are complying with that. There may be some, that fall off, through the cracks, and I can find out, why, that they should be the exception, not the rule.
I have heard this rumor that some engineers, they don't go and pre-screen just in order not to show the increase in the backlog. I have heard that.
No, that's not true.
That's not true.
Well, let me tell you how we calculate.
And before you say that, the message to my team is, look, bringing the backlog down is not only good for businesses because they want their permits issued sooner rather than later and go on, with their business. It's good for us too because by crossing the permits, actually, we can recognize the revenues, and it's good for us and actually well-being as well. So it's a new mindset here. It's a win-win mindset. So I'll reject, that notion because it's totally the opposite, false in philosophy, what we are trying to improve ourselves.
The only time those scenarios have ever happened in my case has been somebody retired.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they get put on the bottom of the file.
Exactly.
That's the only time it's ever truly happened.
And the numbers that we have reported in the earlier slide, it includes our entire inventory. So from the moment the application is received by our permit services and it gets the status of acceptance, so most of you maybe gets the status 210, which means that we have received it and hasn't been pre-screened, that gets counted toward our backlog. Yeah. So this number here includes
everything in the kitchen sink. Everything. To our detriment. Sometimes,
we hear all the time.
We are including silly things in there, and we are shooting ourselves on the foot, but we want to be fully transparent. That's the worst case picture that we are showing.
The only reason I'm bringing this up, because there have been occasions. I keep looking on the file to see, I submitted the application, but it doesn't show. I keep checking. Sometimes my client, he said, did you submit the application? It's been 2 months. I said, definitely, I have the receipt and all that. So I go in and I check, I don't see it. It does show the ID number and all that, but when you go to equipment list, nothing.
Hopefully this will.
But as soon as I call AQMD, they tell me, yes, it has been assigned with the engineer 6 weeks ago. The AQMD personnel, when I called, right away, they give me that information.
Well, that's because there's a diary that we received. And then hopefully that what we were trying to do is provide that diary to outside applicants. So you will know exactly what has happened to your application. And this was something that was brought up. David, I know, has been pushing for it. And our board wanted it, so we're putting it up there. We're holding ourselves to a higher standard. We're holding ourselves more responsible to our applicants. And this is one way that we're approaching this. So, you know exactly where the applications are. You will know as much as the engineering manager that you will call at at that moment.
Like I said, that's the greatest thing I heard so far, because this is something that was really missing for a long time.
Right. And it was, again, a suggestion from you guys, even from some of our board members, to do something like this, and we're pretty close to deploying the system. So I think it will help both sides, right? Guys, we'll have to make back of the room at 12. Somebody else has this one, so we still have 10, 15 minutes to go. That concludes the main portion of the agenda, and item number 5 is open discussion and other topics. I know we touched upon some other issues, for future discussion. Is there anything else that you guys want to bring up?
I do have one. I actually have one of our SCAP members that had an interesting issue, and maybe Jennifer could explain it. But essentially, in a nutshell, my understanding is you had an emergency generator permit application went in, and they voluntarily said, we want to put a DPF on. It's not required, not necessary. We want to put it on to be good neighbors. And they got the permit back, and it didn't include the DPF.
Did not.
Did not. And they want to operate with the DPF, but now they're told, oh, it's been so long, you need to do another permit application, another fee. So it's just one of those disconnects of, we're trying to do the right thing, and can we do something to
Can we talk
fix this right
about
away?
that? Yeah.
Let's talk after, yeah, that's, yeah. Okay.
That's, yeah, we can resolve.
Yeah.
Question?
Yes.
Do you have a policy or a guideline on the ACR yet? So let's say we want to
Yeah.
replace the same kind of
Yes,
ACR?
yes. We do. So one thing that we have been doing over the last couple of years, we have been looking and revising our policies, developing new policies. And one of those policies that we developed was when you change catalyst in your SCR device, rather than going through a permit amendment, to do it off-permit, offline. And we have developed some forms, set in process where you fill out, the before and after, and so long as, it demonstrates equivalency, you'll be able to go ahead and do that, without amending the permit. So we were troubleshooting that with an actual applicant, and I think we are pretty close to finalizing that. So that should be out in the public domain, if not now, very shortly.
Where will that be posted, or how will we know?
We can post it, with, along with the other policies that we have on the web.
Okay, so just keep an eye there.
Yeah, and if you guys want us, we can even bring it up to one of our future meetings and show you what we are doing, because I think definitely it will be tremendous help with our refineries, and the larger facilities utilizing SCRs. And bypasses, well, especially for those of you who are Title V permits. As you all know, it's pretty daunting task to actually amend, a Title V permit, So this will help streamline and facilitate that process.
Yeah, so once that's done for the existing permits, then moving forward, you could build that into the permit itself. So you're gonna have to go outside the permit and try to get this policy, you could build that into the permit in the first place.
Depending how the permit is constructed, the language.
Right, yeah, they give you the flexibility, not just for the SCR, but like, even say carbon system, instead of specifying exact manufacturer, type of carbon, as long as you don't exceed the permit limit, whatever, just build that flexibility into the permit.
So for the SCR, can we participate or give you feedback on?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm trying to remember who were, it wasn't you guys, somebody else, some other facility that we were experimenting. Huh?
We have SCR too.
Yes, yeah, we'll be happy, to work
Because
with
with
you.
Shape project, there will be a lot of ACRs.
Absolutely.
With the same
Absolutely.
company, so
Absolutely.
it's very-
Yeah, definitely we can experiment, and all I can tell you is it's 99+% complete. Okay, so we
Look at
are
that.
that close.
And if I could add,
Yeah.
we're planning to have a special button or link in our permitting page. And once we do that, then all of those can go in that process. We're working on it, it's not finalized, but that is the plan, to have a link in our permitting page that shows all of our policies and procedures.
That's good.
Correct. There's another policy, that we already started implementing to the extent we can, rather than going first PC and then issue the PO. It's a two-step process to go straight, to the PCPO, especially for in instances where there is a source testing requirement. So we are building those in the final permit, so we are bypassing one step. Again, provided that there are not toxic issues, and it's not a controversial project. So we are trying to accelerate that process as well.
And that'll be at the option of the applicant, right? It's not gonna be always.
No, we are trying to push it always.
That's not always a good thing. Let me just say.
You want us to slow things down.
I can tell you exactly why, there are cases where applicants want just a permit to construct.
Yes.
Because sometimes things don't work.
Okay.
And you have an existing, like an existing furnace. And we
okay.
put in a permit to construct for
Mhm.
some new burners in it. I remember distinctly, we would put them in and those burners did not work.
Mhm.
So they needed to get taken back
Yeah.
and the old ones put back in. So there is value in having a two-step process at times. So it's wonderful, good often,
Right.
but not
It's
always.
not a hard and fast
Okay, as
rule
long as we,
necessarily.
yes.
The direction is,
Good.
to the extent you can,
Absolutely.
consolidate the two steps, into
Yeah.
one. But if there are special circumstances,
I agree 100%.
we
yeah.
basically are telling staff,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
can use your.
the permitting team and the engineer will make that determination.
Yeah, good.
Can we make it into a one-step process prior to going?
Right, that's good. As long as it's not always
Right.
by requirement, then we're good, yeah.
You made the bonus vendor guarantee over promised.
I know, right? Who has ever heard of that?
And there are others. So I think we are running out of time, but we can bring some of those new
Yeah.
policies or revised policies. For instance, we are working on the public noticing aspect, trying to streamline some of those policies, establish some de minimis levels, and Brian is helping us with this.
Oh, that'd be
They are
good.
still internally being
Yeah.
reviewed, but once we have them, the draft versions, ready to be released, then we'll be sharing those with you guys.
Yeah.
And I think those two, will help tremendously. That's all I have for today. And is there, item number 6 is the public comment period. Any public comment from anyone? Going once, going twice. Well, I want to thank you all for participating today at our meeting. Very great feedback, and we'll see you in a few months, maybe next quarter.